Picture a job interview. Two candidates are in the waiting room. One arrives with a name everyone already recognizes, a resume that precedes them, a reputation for being sharp. The other is a wild card nobody expects much from. On paper, the outcome looks decided before either of them says a word. Then the interview happens, and something strange occurs. The recognized candidate performs well, exactly as expected, and gets a polite nod. The wild card performs almost as well, and the room lights up. Somehow, the person nobody expected anything from just became the one everyone is talking about. Nothing about their actual answers was dramatically better. So, what changed? The candidate who was underestimated didn't get judged against the same bar as the favorite. They got judged against a lower one, and that difference is the entire story. Psychologist Monica Biernat has spent years studying how people evaluate others, and her research on what she calls shifting standards explains this almost perfectly. When we form an expectation about someone based on their reputation, their group, or simply what we assume about them going in, we don't judge their performance against some fixed, objective scale. We judge it against how well they did relative to what we thought they were capable of. Someone expected to struggle who performs adequately can be rated as more impressive than someone expected to excel who performs at the exact same level. The bar moved before either of them opened their mouth. This connects to a related idea from communication researcher Judy Burgoon, known as expectancy violation theory. Burgoon's work shows that when someone breaks an expectation in a positive direction, the violation itself becomes part of what gets evaluated, not just the behavior. A low expectation that gets exceeded produces a stronger, more memorable, positive reaction than the same behavior would if it had been expected all along. Being underestimated, in other words, quietly builds in room to surprise, and that surprise carries its own separate weight in how people respond to you. There's a third piece here, and it shows up outside the interview room entirely, in sports and competition. Research by Nadav Goldschmied and Joseph Vandello looked at why people root for underdogs so consistently. They found that audiences don't just tolerate the underdog. They often invest more attention, support, and goodwill in someone perceived to be at a disadvantage. An underestimated competitor doesn't just face a lower expectation. People may start hoping the outcome goes their way. Put these three findings together and the mechanism becomes clear. Low expectations lower the bar for what counts as impressive. They amplify the emotional impact of surprising someone, and they can recruit other people into wanting you to succeed. None of that necessarily requires you to be more talented than the favorite. It only requires the room to have underestimated you first. This is where the popular version of this idea usually goes wrong. The common assumption is that being underestimated is simply a disadvantage to overcome, a deficit you have to fight against. But it depends heavily on what kind of achievement is being judged. Biernat's later research draws an important line between subjective judgments and objective ones. In situations where the outcome is measured by something concrete, a final score, a sales number, or a completed project, shifting standards mostly disappear. A low bar doesn't help you if the only thing that matters is a hard number everyone can see. The advantage of being underestimated shows up mainly in subjective evaluation, moments where someone has to form an impression rather than read a scoreboard. That distinction matters because it means being underestimated isn't a strategy anyone should chase on purpose. Chronic underestimation carries real costs. It often means fewer resources, less initial trust, and fewer chances to prove anything at all, since some people never get invited to the interview, the meeting, or the competition in the first place. The advantage only appears at the moment someone underestimated is finally given a real shot, and even then, it applies mainly to how that moment gets perceived, not to whether the underlying skill was actually there. There's also a limit on how long the advantage lasts. Once someone is no longer seen as an underdog, the shifting standard disappears, and they're judged by the same bar as everyone else from that point forward. Reputation catches up. The wildcard candidate who impresses one interview panel walks into the next one with a track record now attached to their name, and the low bar that helped them the first time won't be there again. The advantage is real, but it's temporary. tied to a specific moment where expectations were mismatched with potential. None of this means talent doesn't matter, or that being written off is secretly good for you. It means that in the specific moment when someone forms a judgment about you, and that judgment is subjective rather than measured by a hard number, being underestimated changes the shape of the test itself. You're not competing against the favorite's bar, you're competing against a lower one, with an audience quietly hoping you clear it and a stronger reaction waiting on the other side if you do. So go back to that waiting room. The recognized candidate walked in carrying a standard they had to match exactly to be seen as good. The wildcard walked in carrying almost no standard at all, which meant nearly everything they did well counted as more than expected. Neither of them changed who they actually were between the hallway and the interview room. What changed was which bar the room had already set for each of them before either one sat down. That's the part worth remembering the next time you're the one nobody expects much from.